I come from a creative agency, and my task is really to help everyone, our clients, and including you in the room, to be able to communicate better. And I've seen some of the submitted questions regarding how can we make sense of the numbers and present it in a compelling way. I know some of you also have questions specific to Gametize numbers and the platform and features. So I'll save that to Kinsley. And can I just get a sense of what you're excited to learn today? So over here on my screen, I'm going to talk about 3 pitfalls, and you can share with me which one do you or are you guilty of? Okay, so when it comes to LMS data, like Guan has mentioned, there's so much information. Where do we even start? How can we even make it useful? So I've seen a ton of presentation across different departments and relating to L&D, specifically the one size fits all approach is very prevalent. What do I mean by that? So we have a lot of very high level data. For example, we talk about completion rate when it comes to learning, what are some of the popular causes, etc. But when we have aggregated data and we present it, for example, we might know the top causes, but we don't know why are they performing and who does the cause appeal to. So if we just hover around the aggregated level, we wouldn't be able to tailor our message to the audience. And also, who exactly are we speaking with? Why do we even want to present the numbers? I've seen a lot of presentations relating to upcoming pipeline of topics and causes or even initiative. But when it comes to a crisis, the first budget that gets cut or the department that, yeah, it's deprioritized would be learning. And it's largely because we don't tailor the learning results or the initiative to the department's head context to incentivize them or motivate them to sponsor. So we're going to touch on that in terms of how we can tailor the data message to the audience. And then the second part is being over-reliant on surface level metric. I talked about your completion rates as well as popular causes, or even you might say a number of enrollments a month. But what can we do about it? The key question to always ask is, so what and why? So if you can answer these 2 questions, pretty much your presentation or any kind of pitch, even if you don't have slides, you want to pitch an idea, it would be a lot more convincing and persuasive. And the third pitfall that I commonly see is the failure to link learning to business outcomes. So actually all these 3 by now, you can see it's interconnected, but it manifests itself in different forms. So when it comes to failure to linking learning to business outcome, if you think about wanting to say, use Gametize and try to convince your sponsors to invest in the features or the subscriptions of gamification, how can you justify the cost? So if we have traditional learning versus gamified learning, or even you have learning portal, what is the cost benefit analysis? Am I going to save more by doing things in-house or by investing more in incentivizing or even like rewarding learning? Am I going to see an increase or improvement in performance? And the pitiful part about this is a lot of times we rely a lot on the platform itself to give us the numbers, but we don't think deeper in terms of what are data that has yet been collected that can supplement what is already provided in the dashboard or the platform to make it even more meaningful. So for example, before you embark on a particular learning journey, you always want to measure the baseline in terms of competency. Where is the participants or the employees at? Then when you implement the learning, be it whether it's gamification, be it it's a learning portal, you have something to compare. What is it after? Without this contrast, which I'm going to talk about more later, it's very hard for you to make a case in terms of the ROI. All right. So I'm going to show the 3 pitfalls again, and you can type 1, 2, or 3. Which one are you guilty of? Or which one do you want to learn a little bit more today in terms of how we can overcome it? All right, 1, 2, or 3. You can type in the chat. Thanks, Kinsley. Number 3. And I just want to encourage everyone, there's no shame in this. If you're fantastic at all of this, we can shake things up as well by conversing or communicating and discussing on something else, because we really want to make the session interesting and useful to you. All right, hard to do. You have a very good point, Gons. I hope that's how I pronounce your name. Because a lot of times there are data points that we don't have in order to make that contrast, right? So we can discuss later on what is within our means and what can we do about it. All right, 2 and 3. Thanks a lot, Cindy and Lan. How about Kathy, as well as Jocelyn, Okchun? Okay, I think 3 seems to be quite popular. Okay, 3. All right. You're not alone. Let's dive right into each of this, okay, on how we can overcome. The third one, actually, it's linked to the first and second in terms of how we approach and even make sense of the spreadsheet. So, in terms of turning something that is so raw into something that can drive action, which links to ROI, we have to think of a couple of things. And this is what we usually teach in our course. You can remember the acronym P, R, and A. How you tell story, the data story, that really depends on first the P. Why are you presenting this piece of information in the first place? And then the R refers to who are you presenting to? Because the ROI of learning would vary depending on who you're speaking with. And then the last one is very important, which is now you have all this information. What is the action you want your audience to take, or you yourself want to discuss internally with your L&D team to take in order to arrive at certain outcomes? So I'll give you an example. If the purpose of the presentation, or why we even embark on reviewing the data, is to review the effectiveness of the current learning mode and factors that affect engagement, and we want to review this with the team in order to brainstorm and refine learning experience to increase overall engagement. So some of you have asked a question before the session about where do you even start? And this would be very helpful because rather than just giving a very templatized kind of presentation format, you can think about, okay, what are some factors that would affect engagement? And how does it link to learning mode? So if we break this down, some of the relevant data points we might want to look into would be learner segmentation. How does engagement vary by different demographic? It can be by departments, it can be by roles, or it can even be by their seniority. You might notice that perhaps some departments are more engaged because there's a learning culture driven by the senior leaders, because senior leaders themselves set themselves as an example in terms of completing certain causes or certain projects. Or you might notice that, hey, perhaps colleagues in certain regions are not so engaged because there is a different preference in terms of how they would like to learn. For one, I know in, say, Indonesia or the Philippines, we have clients based there and they are really insistent in learning in a kind of like a hackathon format where you cram everything in, but because the learning in person, it's so strong in terms of the culture, there's interaction and it's fun, it really sticks. But then there are some, for example, not so much on geographical location, but more on the roles. For example, salespeople, they are always on the ground, so busy. It's really very difficult for them to sit in a one-day workshop in order to learn or even complete a self-paced online course because they are just not interested or they just find it hard to find the time. If we can understand the relevant data points, we already can come up with certain hypotheses on what we can look into or look out for when we analyze and review the data. And then there are some more examples, for example, types of content. Is there a relation between the completion rate with the difficulties of module or certain relevance in terms of topic or the time spent? Is there a specific time of the day where engagement is a lot higher? And how would this affect you in terms of maybe scheduling content? You might want to leverage the peak learning moments to notify them in order to drive engagement further. And does engagement taper over time? So when we talk about ROI, we have to work backwards, right? So business outcomes in terms of dollars and cents. If you want to get there, learning is a means to that end. And then how do you learn? If people don't complete the courses, then you can't really get us to a certain level of competency. So if that's your baseline, these are the relevant data points that you can first look into. And hypothesis or potential insights could be like what I've mentioned. Certain countries, teams, or role might have different preference due to learning culture as well as availability. And then what are some potential action steps you want to take is to adjust the format accordingly so that you can tackle the completion rate head on to ensure that it is at the optimal level. What about example number 2, where we're not just speaking within our team members in L&D, but to stakeholders whom you want to convince in order to invest in learning and prioritize learning in their teams. So first, our purpose of the presentation could be, how can learning initiative actually help to drive business impact? And you're speaking to department heads. And by the end of the presentation, ideally, you want to gain approval in terms of having them sponsor rewards and incentive. So for example, if you're using Gametize, some of you would probably already see the results that, hey, incentivizing or having this competitive element or challenge or leaderboard does encourage people to participate. But still, there's the question mark as to, okay, they participate. So how does it affect my business performance? So again, we want to talk about some of the relevant data points specific to ROI. For example, completion rate is linked to certification. And certification is linked to specific competencies that is tied to business objectives, or it's linked to performance review. So if you have an ongoing conversation with the department heads as to what they want to prioritize in terms of their business objectives, what are some key competencies that will help them get there, then perhaps this can be the case that you make to say that, hey, if we issue X number of certifications in this particular competency, it means that you're moving in the right direction in achieving your business goals. And then, of course, we also have rewards and engagement. How does it improve learners' participation? And what is the overall cost saving? If, say, a sales manager were to send their team for traditional workshop versus actually investing in rewards and incentives on the learning portal, what is the cost and benefit? And of course, ideally, the benefit should outweigh the cost in the long run. So that's also something that you can think ahead. And all these questions, we are not even tackling the data yet, but it's very important to set the foundation in terms of how you then make something compelling out of it. And if you're not so sure where to start, now we are at the age where AI is going to be our good friend and enabler. So you can actually give it a couple of prompts, and it can even suggest to you what are some engagement metrics that are actionable that you can actually include in your presentation to have the narrative. So you cover all grounds rather than thinking in your very default point of view as to how you typically would present. And these are just a few examples that we have mentioned earlier on. All right. So by the end of this particular session, we would be giving a QR code for you to access a free cheat sheet. And this is a list of potential insights that you can gather from your data so that you know what kind of information to look out for, how to categorize them, and then visualize it and then present it. And what are some of the potential actions that you can take that would drive business outcome. Okay, so stay to the end. We'll give this during the conclusion. So that's the first part in terms of thinking and strategizing. Then how then can you uncover insights based on this kind of questions? Now, Gametize platform already has a lot of interesting and very useful visual charts. For example, completion rate across a period of time. You can see that there's ups and downs. Then how are you going to present this or make a story out of it? It, again, depends on the why and the so what. For example, there is something unusual over here. We want to lean into why this might be the case. Now, can you type in the chat, based on your best guess, what do you think could be the reason why there is a dip in 2019 May in terms of completion? And is this a cause for concern? So now we're trying to make sense of the numbers. Why and so what are two questions that we should always address. So you can feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. What is your best guess as to why this might be the case? And is this a cause for concern? There's Deepa and Aviral. Thanks, Kinsley. There's no new content during the month. Okay. That could be so as well. If you're talking about challenges or causes that are launched at a different phase rather than the library of content where people can self-consume. And then could there be a reason like holiday, end of financial year? It could be as well. All right. Maybe it's close to the June holiday. People are not studying. It depends on which country you're in. New financial year could be crisis, or maybe there's a budget cut. There are so many things. Again, it depends on the context of your organization. And what we need to do is instead of just presenting numbers like this, if you already are, because it's like the common presentations that I've seen, we can give a little bit more clue to why. For example, is the dip because the course takes 1 month to complete? And then over there, like what Kinsley has mentioned, there is no new courses that are launched. And then how do we present it? Actually, we might not necessarily need to visualize it in other way. We could just verbalize to say that, hey, in February, this is where we start our first course. And usually it takes about 1.5 months or 2 months for it to complete. So it's usual that we see the first month the completion rate is lower because they're just starting out. And some people are like early adopters, right? So they're very fast in the game and they complete fast. While there are people over here towards the tail end, or maybe in May, that they are struggling a little bit. And then in your next slide, you might want to look into individual months to see, okay, who are the learners who are struggling, who are taking more time to complete? And then which departments are they from? Is there a particular pattern? And that's where, again, you draw the insight. If there is a pattern, then perhaps there is something that you can do about it. All right. So thanks a lot, Avira. Motivations did because of the mid-year. Yeah, if that's the case as well, then what kind of actions can we take? Can we propose in the presentation in order to bump this figure up? So that's when we are talking and starting to make it a little bit more, our presentations more engaging and more meaningful. We can also look into the baseline or the targets that we want to meet in terms of completion. Let's say if this is in percentages, below 50%, is it considered poor? If so, why is that the case? Hence, so what and why? These are two questions that you can answer in every single slide in order to make it more meaningful. Now, this is another example. Let's say you have a very simple table of numbers. How would you make sense of it and visualize it? Now we have different course topics as well as average time spent in terms of minutes and the completion rate. And assuming that average time spent is for one course across the department divided by the number of employees, because some departments can have more employees than less. So this average would be a lot more accurate in order to track maybe the engagement level. So how would you visualize it? Would you visualize it in a bar chart, in a pie chart, a line chart, or would you just keep it like that in a table format? Again, you can type it in the chat. All right. And thanks, Kinsley. Always the first to reply. A bar chart. Scatter plot. Interesting. Okay. So regardless what your answer is, for example, if it's a bar chart, again, why do you want to present it like that? If this is what you commonly do, I would like to invite you to think a little bit deeper. What is the end in mind? Why do you want to put it in a bar chart like that? Can it be in terms of correlation? For example, like this. If we visualize it differently, we might gather the insight that perhaps there is a point where once the course or the challenge or whatever gamified projects that you have, once it passes a certain time span that people take longer to complete, it affects the completion rate. And now we can see the correlation. The longer the time span, the lower the completion rate. And what is the sweet spot? And that's where we make our presentations more actionable in terms of perhaps in this case, splitting the course into bite size, smaller chunks so that it's easier to digest. And then again, because we want to track ROI, right? Let's say in this quarter, this is our suggestion. In the next quarter, we will also want to present what is the contrasting difference, what we have changed, and does it in fact change the results? Okay, so this is insight number one. And then insight number two is we want to say, okay, I have this set of data, but it's not enough for me to make it meaningful. What else can I present? So beyond just completion rate, we might want to look into different departments. For example, in this case, insight number two is that okay, admin team is the least active, while finance being the most, because you can see the bar is really long in terms of the average time spent per minute. And then it's also broken down into different types of causes. So rather than showing everything all at once, maybe we just want to prioritize which team is the least performing, least active, and which is the most, and then the most popular content and some of the qualitative findings as well. And here is also another insight that we can generate. If we were to use the same data set, but organize it differently. Now, not so much in terms of which is the most active department, but more of which is the most popular course. And we might even split it into elective and mandatory courses. Here, there might be an insight to say that, hey, actually across the board, all departments are quite engaged in this generative AI, even though it's not relevant to their work. So if you want to tie it to business objective, how can we leverage this interest in order to use AI to enable their work? Or can we weave AI, this topic, into other mandatory courses in order to ramp up the interest and learning or relevance? All right. So this is an example of how a same data set can present very different insight just by visually organizing it differently. So if you haven't already done this, I highly encourage you to do. And here's another example. Say one set of data or one chart can have very different insights that you want to focus. And it all ties back to the purpose of your presentation. If my purpose here is to drive up a certain business agenda, let's say the chief cybersecurity officer would like it to be mandatory that across the organization, people are equipped with this cybersecurity skill. But then we can see that, hey, actually people are not picking it up at all. Why is that the case? Why is it the lowest engagement? Again, we can have qualitative insight and some actionable steps, be it whether gamification or is it tailoring the content to roles? Is it leveraging leadership involvement? So PRA, this time round, if we're speaking to the cybersecurity officer, this is something that we can consider presenting. All right. So same chart, different insights, just by changing your headline a little bit and highlighting a different part of the chart and giving a different call to action. Okay. And this is an example of a not so meaningful chart. Just now I briefly mentioned, if we talk about total time spent per department, why is this not meaningful? Is because what if finance department has the most number of employees? Then no matter what, they would always be the ones spending the most time on the cost portal. So it's not meaningful and insightful at all. Hence, sometimes we have to also think further, what are some assumptions that we make and what are some data fallacies that we might commit so that we can avoid it altogether. So if you have exported data like this from your LMS portal, or Gametize actually have this as well, a function which Kinsley would mention a little bit later. How can you make sense of this? Actually, if you don't already know, there is this thing called analyze data using AI to extract insights. If your data it's not too complex, this is what it can do. Basically, if you just simply want to say, okay, which has the highest point or redemption rate, they can easily answer it for you. Okay. So now moving on to the last point, proposing strategies to optimize your ROI of training programs. This is what we usually do at the end of, actually before and after the workshop, because for Highspark, we teach communications program, and typically communications is very intangible in terms of the business outcome. So in order to measure some form of performance gain, we would have a before and after per learner in order to see in general, how do they rate themselves? And then you can also involve their supervisor and you involve the trainer. So we have 3 data points over here, and then we can average it out to say that, hey, indeed, this is the increase in proficiency. And ideally, again, the proficiency should be linked to the business objectives. And this is another one specifically in terms of key skill set. For example, in a presentation workshop, we might want to measure behavior in terms of, okay, now is the presentation coherent in terms of structure? Before, maybe people are struggling, they rated themselves like a 2 out of 10, but now it's a 6 out of 10. And again, supervisor as well as trainer justifies that and assures that it is in fact true. So when you can measure behavior like that, it shows that your initiative is a lot more successful. And this is so much more meaningful than just completion rate or what you have at the tail end. contrast and context is very important in storytelling. So if you're lacking contrast and context in any kind of pitches or any initiative that you want to propose to your stakeholders, please include that in your pitch. All right. So hopefully by showing some of these visual examples, you can be inspired that, hey, these are things that I can adopt and immediately start embedding in my upcoming presentation. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to learn more, we have a Q&A session afterwards. And I think Kingsley would also follow up with how exactly can you specifically use certain Gametize feature in order to take this to the next level. So I'd like to invite Kingsley now to take over the stage.
Thank you, Kai-Sing. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Kingsley. I'm from Gametize. So I'll be presenting and sharing how you can utilize Gametize as a platform for a gamified LMS, as well as you can use it even more than an traditional learning management system. Not only that, I'll also share how you can use AI to help you to analyze the data, because truth be told, to be honest, not everyone is expert in data. So sometimes we need help, especially in this era, AI. AI is easy to use, easy to access, and also affordable as well. I'll be sharing that in the moment. So now let me just share my little screen, if possible. Trying to find the screen sharing icon. Screen, and there you go. All right, so the first topic I would like to briefly introduce everyone here is Gametize. You can actually use it as a learning management systems. Now, for informations, we are the enterprise-grade gamification platforms, not only mainly using for engagements or motivational purpose. You can even craft it in a way that provide a learning experience for your target audience. Now, there are three core elements in LMS. So the first one is the learning content, right? The most important functions is where you can manage your content, you can upload your content or create your own contents. Now, by all the contents you are ready in your platforms, the next phase is you might want to assess your learners through learning the contents. That's how you can justify whether the learning content works, whether you are achieving your targets. And of course, we also want to add on some engagement element as well. Since most of the time, LMS is a single interactions. I would say it's a single interaction instead of dual interactions solutions. So Gametize, we are having the functions as more than an LMS. We are focused very much not only on learning content management, but also in learner engagement as well. So we do have achievements, leaderboards, rewards, social mechanics, like you can vote, you can comment, you can have a discussion forums, and digital credentials, which is built on blockchains, and even more than that. But not only that wise, as a LMS, it's very important for us to personalize the learning path for different learning individuals, right? And that's what you can do in Gametize. Now, let me just showcase you one example that we did for the compliance training. So this is a bank compliance training that is focusing on anti-money laundering or even anti-bribery. Now, for this training wise, all this content here, you can custom, you can build, and you can even assign to different players based on their learning behaviors. Now, over here, one of the part that you see here is that we do offer many different types of learning content. So we have a blend of video learning contents, or even you can ask questions. What is your opinions in the anti-money laundering? Can you give us your feedback? We can also collect quizzes, right? We can have a pop quiz during the learning sessions and so on. Now, I would not want to touch this many in these sessions because I want to focus much on data. So if you are interested, right, you can always let us know. We can have a demo sessions on the Gametize. So this is where I want to come in on the second part, which is to create a user feedback mechanisms. Most of the time, LMS is just a one-way interactions, right? Just the admin or the teachers, they create a content and they want to deliver to the target audience. So there is no or minimum way for the learners to provide their personal feelings or their personal feedback back to the admins. Having a feedback is a very helpful functions, yet that you can identify the learners' progress. You can even learn how they are progressing in the entire learning sessions, and you can always improve your learning programs on the next phase. Now, there are a few of the example how you can create your feedback mechanisms. There are two types. The first type is a passive. So what I mean by passive is, for example, progress tracking is where the users can know their current learning progress. It is automatically visualized for the users. Not only it can tell the users how many challenges left, it can also act as a motivational tools, right? For example, you are playing a games, Candy Rush, there are 200 stages left. And this is where it can give you a sense of motivations. I have to go through, I have to climb harder, climb higher so that I can compete with the other learners, or this is something that I have to do for my own purpose. And the next one is a personalized message upon completions. And this is one functions that I think is useful and important. So personalized message, I do not mean that it is just purely provide a message like, congratulations, you have completed a challenge, right? You get it right, you can proceed to the next challenge. Not only that, in terms of having personalized training for each individuals, it is very important to emphasize the learning again when they complete the learning, right? When they complete the learning through different challenges or through videos or PDF. So in Gametize, what you can do is that you can custom a feedback based on different completions. So let's say, for example, if a player's answer incorrectly, sometimes you can provide more insights for them to refresh or recap their memories or their learnings through this custom message, right? A custom feedback for them. So they can continue to learn even though they didn't answer correct. And that's what we mean for personalized message upon completions. There are also another way, which is an active way, using survey or pool challenge to collect more feedbacks from the learners so that we can know what they are facing, what they really enjoy, or what they really want, or any feedback that we can help us to improve the training together. So like I mentioned, it can be very useful for you to identify the gaps between where the learners have to learn compared with the learning content that you provide to the learners to make sure that you are not giving the content in the wrong directions. And of course, you can always enhance your engagement, right? Using personalized message or point system, reward system, achievements to motivate them to do. And last but not least, it's very important for us to use the data to measure the training effectiveness. Some of the mechanics that you can use to collect this kind of data, right, is actually using voting, comments, or discussions. So this another type of feedback mechanisms that I would mention. It is more focused into a social functions that allow the users to create their community, to create a community so that they have a sense of belongings. They belong to this community. They will always come back here to discuss on these topics with another learners. And it is just like a home for themselves. So instead of just having one way for the users to learn, having these kind of social functions can work very well for long-term run. And what are the key insights that you can retrieve from this type of social functions is you can know what are their motivations and also what are their learning attitudes. For example, let's say you download comments and more data from our platforms. You can identify how many total words or comments that is posted over a certain period of time. You can even compare the active users versus inactive users and also the engagement numbers. Now, this type of data can be useful if you are looking at whether the learners are very active in your learning contents, because somehow we want them to learn themselves. We are providing a self-learning content, and our target is to make sure that every single week or month there is a certain amount of target of users onboard or log in into the platform to learn themselves. So having this kind of metrics can help too. Now, at the beginning of these presentations, I do mention, like myself, right, I do not have much knowledge in terms of what kind of data to use. So sometimes I do use AI to help me. And this is where I want to emphasize in the next point, right? How to maximize the learning management systems using data-driven insights and by AI. I got a questions for everyone here. Before you even hit the report buttons, right? There is a lot of report buttons that you can access in LMS. You have to think something about this, right? What exactly are you diving into? There are two things that I really want to emphasize. You should always look at before you even start create your content or even start to download the reports that you want, right? Before everything of this starts, just take a look on these 2 points. Now, if you have any idea of these 2 points, you can let us know in the comment. You can type in the comments to guess what are the two very important insights or very two important informations you have to identify before you even start create your learning content. So some people might guess it is about your target audience, or it is about your end outcome, right? What is your result? And the answer is yes, Deepa, you're very correct, right? It's about the end outcome. And we have Ivy about the target audience background. So there are two things that you have to take a look, which is to identify the key problems that you want to solve on this learning and what are the learning objectives. And these are the most essentials and important informations. You have to make this clear before you even start to design your learning. Now in Gametize, we have a Gametize sexy playbook that we run through for each of our clients to design their gamification strategy. So if you take a look closely, even before we start to design the game, you go through the first two steps, which is to define your problem and also determine your goals. Now, these two is very important because our client is investing a budget in our solutions. So we want to make sure that they are solving their initial problems and they are achieving their goals. So having these two parts, put it at the front, can help you to shape your entire learning plan and also gamification strategies in the later phase. Now, let me give you more example about that. So let's say if your learning objective is about focusing on, I want to improve my knowledge, acquisitions of my target audience, or I want to have a behavior change among my learners, I want to improve the teamworks, then having this layout, now that what are the next data or relevant data sets that you can look at? For example, to improve the knowledge acquisitions of my learners, the data set I can look at is content consumption data, or even quizzes, or even data like time span of my contents and so on. Or if I'm looking at their skill development, I can also look at performance metrics such as the role play or even real life scenario, how they apply their skill after the training. So identify the learning objective first, then take a look at what are the relevant data set that can help to achieve your learning objective. And this can be useful later on. Now, let me bring this example. So just now we talk about bank compliance training. So normally in common learning objective for compliance training, it might be to make sure that all my employees know what is the frameworks in the compliance. So in order to do that, I will have to make sure that I have a score report, the knowledge score report. So the higher the score and the better the understanding of the frameworks. And that's how you can prove to your management, or this how you can justify and justify the successfulness of your learning content. And one more thing is that make sure that always using the right content with the data. So as you can see, there's a core relationship. Once you have identified your learning objective, which data to use, and the next one is don't waste your time to think about the content first. Since you already know what type of data you want to use, then why not use the data? Let me give you another example using the bank compliance training again. Just now we talk about the knowledge score report. So I know that in order to have this type of report, it's very important to create content such as a quiz module, learning module, quizzes, and in order to make sure that my employees able to identify suspicious activities, the data set I must look at is the activity detection report. So in order to get this report, the content that I have to input in my LMS can be scenario-based simulations or even real-world applications. And that's how we know what type of data to do. So in common way, we always proceed to create content first, then only search of what the data type they want to download. Now, I hope that in these sessions, you can do it. You can think of another way, which is using a backwards, right? Identify your learning objective first, then know which data sets to use in order to justify your learning objective, and then create a content that can help you to solidate the data sets that you want. Okay, now the last one, harnessing AI, using AI for data analysis, which is I every day use it for my own work purpose, and it is very super helpful. Questions for everyone here. I believe you might know the answer too, right? So why use AI for data analysis? You can guess it. What are the reasons that we are encouraged to use AI for data analysis? To be honest, there's a lot of companies that are using AI for their own data analysis. So that's why in this era, it is time for us to also look into this area as well. So let us know, right? What do you think the reasons that we are using AI for data analysis? It can be a lot of reasons. Like for example, no need programmers, correct, right? There's no need programmers and pastors can save a lot of time, correct? Everyone can use it. It is made into very simple uses. You just need to know how to communicate with the AI. Since AI is built based on language, and everyone of here have a certain language skills, no matter what type of language, right? So it is very convenient for us to communicate with the AI, and it can do more possibilities, yes, like forwards I mentioned. It can also identify some hidden data or insights that we might overlook. And of course, Lun say there is no human error. I would like to say that no human error, as that one is not 100% if you don't know how to use the AI. There are some correct way and proper way to use AI in order to achieve no human error, because I still face a lot of feedback, right? A lot of people, they comment and feedback on ChatGPT, for example. The data is incorrect, the answer is not what I want. But if you take a look on how they use a ChatGPT, then you know that it is the way they use is not the correct way. Prompt that they input to the ChatGPT is not the effective prompt. So that's why you have to always keep repeating and repeat again. Now, our goal of using AI, there are two main goals. We want to turn the data into insights and actions. So how do we turn that? First one, we use AI to identify the hidden insights, hidden data. And we also can use AI to help us to create actions, to let them identify what kind of actions that I can improve based on the data in the learning purpose in my LMS, for example. So I just want to share these AI tools for everyone. It's called ChatGPT, of course, but if you know that ChatGPT on May 23, they published a brand new model. It's called ChatGPT 4.0. So 4.0 allow you to interact real time with Excel sheet, which means you can ask the ChatGPT to analyze the Excel. You can convert the Excel into visual charts. You can even customize inside the ChatGPT itself. You can ask ChatGPT to do a lot more things, like you can have in-depth analysis and suggestions. So let me do an example for you. So let's take this quiz result for bank compliance, right? Now, back to just now what we learned about how to use the correct set of data. So if our data for quiz result is to some of the common data set, if you look at quiz result, is completion rate, passing rate, or time of completions. The reason is because for completion rate wise, it is can help us to measure how many learners completed the training module. This is also very important for us, right? Some of the insights example that we might face is if you notice that there is a very low completion rate, then something might be wrong with your contents, or something the issue can be your content difficulties, or the length of the training is too long so that no one can finish and their motivations is dropped during the sessions of training. So with this kind of report that you get, now the next section is you can shorten the modules, right? Or you can introduce more interactive elements, or you can provide incentives such as you can provide points, badges, achievements for them to unlock so that they are motivated to complete. Great. All right, so I will just showcase one last demonstrations for this ChatGPT, if you don't mind, right? Just a quick one to showcase how it works. For ChatGPT 4.0, just as simple as just upload the Excel into the ChatGPT. And the first thing it will do is that it will automatically analyze the data for you. You do not need to insert any prompt. Now, the next thing, it will suggest you what type of data that you want to generate. So let's say you can show average point for players. You can even filter the top scorers. You can even have passing rate to generate from this Excel sheet. So let me just proceed with the passing rate to give you just one demonstrations of how it works. So let's say this is my prompt, right? To ask you to provide a detailed analysis of passing rate. And I give this benchmark. So the passing score is actually 80 and above, and the 79 and below, the score that is considering fail. So ChatGPT is smart enough to identify the scores based on your Excel, and it will show you in details. Let's say the 21% pass and 31 fail, and majority of your learners fail in your quiz. Now, this is where you have to identify why there are more than 50% of your users fail on your quiz. Is it because of your quiz is too difficult, or is it because of there is some difficulty for them to access the quiz? These are something that you can find out. Or you can even ask ChatGPT to generate the insights for you. Let's say, for example, can you generate the insights based on passing rate? And that's where it will give you an insights. 59% fail. So area of concern is that maybe because the content is too challenging, right? Or you might require additional training. Your training is not enough. They do not understand the bank compliance training based on your current materials. So these are some of the demonstrations, the functions that you can use your AI to help you. All right, that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thanks, Kingsley. Actually, before we proceed to the Q&A, perhaps, Kaisen, we actually have stuff to announce. I think Kaisen has some events and all that. What we could do is to send out everyone an email with all the stuff that we want to share, including the cheat sheet that Kaisen was willing, so generously to share with all of us. There is the QR code, if I'm going to scan that as well. And in the meantime, I think we already have a question. Is it Gonzaga?
Yeah, you can call me Gonzaga. That's perfect.
All right, okay. How to improve the post-learning evaluation of the business impact of the training in the next 3 to 6 months after the training? Are you talking about a lag time of about 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, it's basically whenever you put your staff into training,
Yeah.
it's over time how to actually measure whether they're actually using the knowledge that they have learned during the training. And typically, so I used to have a managed team, and this process is actually not there in actually ensuring that there has been change based on the training.
Okay. Kaisen, you want to take that?
Yes. So it's a challenge that we are trying to overcome as well and have successfully done so to a degree. Typically, when we conduct workshops, if you're talking about traditional learning where there's a time period, instead of letting your stakeholders know that it's a 1 day workshop or it's going to take a few days, you want to let them know that the course would be, let's say, 3 to 6 months. And that 3 to 6 months would include pre, during, and post. So the formal learning, let's say it's a day. That's where you schedule their availability, put them in a room, or go through an online learning. And then subsequently, usually what we do is 3 to 6 months after that formal learning, we will come in for group coaching. And in between, we'll get them to assess themselves and also ideally rope in the stakeholder in order to create some form of project. So for example, if the competency that we want them to gain is in terms of public speaking skills, right? So formal learning 1 day, and then after that, they would have individual assignments. Maybe it's a recording a presentation, and then we will have like behavioral scores. Again, like I've mentioned earlier on, instead of getting the learners to rate themselves, we want the supervisor to also be on board and rate their employees and their team members, and ideally have qualitative feedback so they're invested. And then 3 months after, you're going to say that, hey, this is a check-in again that has been already scheduled. So don't make it optional. It's part of the package. And then ask them, okay, after that 3 months, what are some behaviors that you're seeing change in your team members? Again, get them to rate. And then you have the quantifiable metric to see what is the difference. And then, of course, if there's submission as well, you can do a qualitative analysis and a reporting to show what are some areas that have visibly improved. And if anyone has gained like a promotion or even like a testimony from their fellow colleagues or even clients, that's even more fantastic. You can put it in the report as well. So I think this has to do with changing your SOP and how you communicate learning to your stakeholders from the traditional, okay, let's just be available for this 1 day. You want them to know that it's going to be a pathway and a journey. I'm not sure if you've already taken on this approach and how has that worked for you?
Just to add, perhaps some behaviors are a little harder to demonstrate or a little harder to be observed. For example, if it's a problem-solving workshop that they're going through, it's not easy over a short period of time to say that the quality of problems or the problem solving has improved that much. Perhaps one of the things that you need to look at is, are they practicing the techniques? Are they getting together more often? So you want to look at positive behaviors, and then maybe subsequently down the line, has the quality of problem solving improved in terms of whether they're doing faster, are they getting together with better ideation techniques and all that? So I guess you need to, like what Tyson said, some qualitative and some quantitative observable metrics to pin down at the start to set expectations.
Okay, thanks. That gives some idea. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Feel free to just unmute yourself. While you're thinking, Kingsley, can you just tell us a little bit more about how we can ensure data privacy when we're using a tool like ChatGPT, especially
All
with
right.
inputting sensitive information?
Sure. Just a little bit information for everyone here. So if you are concerned about your data privacy when you are using ChatGPT to AI tools like ChatGPT, then you should look at the pricing plan that I offer. So for ChatGPT wise, the price plan for business, which is 25 USD per month, that one will not use your data to train their model. So it is, I would say if you're concerned about that, then I would suggest you to subscribe to the team plan, which is their business plan, or you can go even further to use their own API for your own purpose as well.
Thanks. Questions from the floor?
I note that there's been some difficulty downloading the file via the link. I've just sent a new one in the Zoom chat. Let's see if that works. Thank you. Right. I think we've got questions submitted before this session as well. Maybe you can take one or two before we wrap up.
Yeah, let me just quickly refresh that about using Gametize as an LMS. I'm just going to maybe condense this a little bit. One of the questions was integration of data from LMS to internal HRMS is another thing that is sought after by organizations. How can this also be achieved on Gametize? Kingsley or perhaps even Keith?
Yeah, in short, we support API integrations. So some of our clients, they will request us to integrate with their own systems. Then we can pull data from the system, or even they can pull the data from our end to their own system as well to display or showcase both learning in different platforms. So in short, it is doable.
Actually, to add on to the question, I think it will also be useful after today to think about integrating your LMS data with PMS, Performance Management System, especially for many of you who voted number 3. How do you want to make sure learning generates business impact? I think that would be fantastic. So one of the best practices is actually to include your learning or get stakeholders on board in terms of including learning as part of their performance review, and then sharing that feedback to the L&D team so that we can be an enabler for the team leads. And ideally, every team leader should be educated on how to assess learning and competency so that you can work together in order to drive learning and growth within your organization. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Kaisin. If you have any more questions, I've just sent the link for the event app, and you can continue to ask questions and have a feel of how the Gametize app works from a user's perspective. And if there are questions that address to Kaisin, we'll notify her, and then she can get on the app, answer all your questions.
Yep. And one last thing, if you've learned something great today and you'd like to dive deep into data analytics or how to storytell and visualize, we do have public courses that we will run in about November and December. We have contemplated on this for a very long while because our team is very lean, and doing sessions for the public, it's quite intensive in terms of logistic. But we've received a couple of requests, and we have considered doing it again. So we are launching a 1-for-1 promo just for this period till the end of the year. Spots are limited. So if you have been thinking about filling your classes, but you couldn't fill a class with your team members, you can send them individually to this particular webpage to check out more. And I think we'll send more details in the follow-up email after this event. So hope everyone has taken away something today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kaisin. I've also sent a link to our gamification certification program that's done online. So a reason why we do it is because we generally almost always have a regional, if not global, participation. Our next run will be in November. Send you the link, and we will continue to furnish you with more information moving forward. It should be towards the tail end of November. It's a 10 hours in total. So you have about an hour of asynchronous foundation module, which is hosted on our platform. 2 4-hour sessions that will be live facilitated. And then there is another 2.5 hours of platform training. So at the end of the day, when you're done with this gamification certification, we assure you would be able to do the kind of planning as Kingsley has mentioned in our 6D playbook, as well as create a project. That's all I have for you today. Thank you all once again for being here. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to post them and we will get to them. So with that, I just want to thank everyone, Kaisin and Kingsley, for your time. And I wish everyone a really wonderful day ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Guan, for moderating.
Thank you.